Hey, welcome to another episode of The List. Jordan will not be joining us today. He is coaching football. We have with us Rob Staton, who joined us for our mock draft a couple months ago. Rob, we can talk about the Seattle Dolphins game if you want, or we can talk about something more interesting and talk about the EFL championship, since you got two teams in the championship this year. For me personally, that'd be more interesting than this game, just because of our quarterback situation.
Yeah, well, and it is an interesting division, to be fair, isn't it? But yes, I'm sorry that the Dolphins' season has gone this way. It reminds me of a few years ago when Russell Wilson hurt his thumb or his finger or something. I think it was like week 3 or week 4, and was out for an extended period of time. That ended up being his last season in Seattle. And once your quarterback's gone, it does kind of put a dampener on things, doesn't it?
Yep. And I've been saying to people, as soon as he got hurt, even if he's fine, because it sounds like he's doing okay. I kind of knew they were going to put him on IR. Stuff with Tua is going to be a lot more sensitive because he's had so many concussions already. Well, 3, but this was another one where he fenced. So hoping he can get healthy. And let's be clear, too. I picked back in May when we did a preview. I picked us to lose this game with Tua. Now with Skylar Thompson, I'm hoping for the best. But I think we can both agree this is probably going to be going Seattle's way.
Well, you know, if I was to sort of look at Seattle's first 2 games, the first game they were trailing at halftime to Bo Nix and the Broncos. So, you know, that's worth pointing out. And although Seattle righted the ship in the second half, they only won that game by 6 points. And then last weekend, the Patriots are a much better team than the Broncos at the moment. I mean, whether the Patriots will be able to withstand this, you know, for more than just a couple of weeks, because I don't think they have the personnel to be, you know, the kind of team that could beat the Bengals on the road most weeks. I think they will probably fizzle out a little bit. At the minute, they're pretty good. But it's still Jacoby Brissett at quarterback. Mm-hmm. And even though the Seahawks knew that they weren't going to be facing a top quarterback of the weekend and that the running game was going to be New England's key feature, Seattle gave up 185 rushing yards. So as much as I'd like to think, well, this is in the bag, and, you know, certainly I do think the Seahawks should win. They are at home. I think Seahawks fans would be well within their rights to say it'd be a massive disappointment to lose to Skylar Thompson. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I wouldn't say it's a foregone conclusion, because Seattle they're not, unlike, let's say, the Bucs or the Cardinals, or maybe not the Cardinals, they're a bad example because the Rams are injured. But you know that the Bucs have beaten the Lions on the road. You know, the Saints have blown the doors off Dallas. You know, there are other teams in the NFC who have had a key win so far. The Seahawks haven't had that yet.
Fair enough. And we joke about Skylar Thompson too. I said in our last episode, the last 2 years the Dolphins have started out hot, and then they were in by the time the end of the season got there. We were injured to hell 2 years ago. It was Tua, the offensive line. This past year it was the offensive line. It was the edge rushers. So it is all about, it's not how you start, it's how you finish. And it's weird because in the grand scheme of things, 18 weeks doesn't seem that long compared to other sports, but it is still, like, football is a long season. And with the injuries, it's all about getting healthy.
Yeah, the NFL is probably more than any other league is a war of attrition. You know, often it is who is left by the time you get to the postseason in terms of which of your top players are left. Are enough of them there? If you are a team that is heavily weighted on, let's say, quarterback, a couple of receivers, maybe a great tight end, or a strong offensive line, you know, you need as many of those pieces there as possible. And you might be able to afford to lose a top pass rusher, maybe, because the offense is so good. But equally, if you are the kind of team that is built on having like a number of blue chip players and you don't have a star quarterback, you know, losing something like your best pass rusher, like I don't think the Niners, for example, get to the Super Bowl last year if, let's say, Nick Bosa gets injured in week 10 and then misses the rest of the season. So, you know, it really is about who's there at the end. I think the thing with Miami is it's a very unusual situation. You know, concussions are not unusual within the NFL, but to have the quarterback have the kind of concussions that Tua's had, the reaction that he's had immediately after suffering the concussion, and the debate around whether he will come back or not is slightly unique. Like typically, let's say, hopefully this doesn't happen, but let's just say Geno Smith has a concussion in this game. I don't think anybody will say immediately afterwards, is that him done for his career or something like that? The anticipation will be he'll be back in a couple of weeks or 3 weeks or something like that. But with Tua, it's because of the history, it's more like, what's going to happen here? So I suspect as a Dolphins fan, I'm just sort of looking at this from a distance. It must be quite frustrating because the future is unclear. I guess from your perspective, you probably don't know whether you should be watching the college quarterbacks right now in anticipation of drafting one maybe in the first round next year. You may end up cursing winning that, coming from behind to beat the Jaguars for draft position, when all's said and done, if that's how this season ends up being. Or we could all be sat here in 6 weeks and Tua Tagovailoa said, no, I actually want to carry on playing. Now, whether the league allows that, who knows? Because I think they're going to have a say, but he could be playing again. And then you don't know. I mean, like my perception of Miami is that this was the worst time to play you guys, because if you were coming with a full quota of top players, you tend to play best football early on, when perhaps where the weather's a bit nicer, and and if you were playing Seattle in December and it was ramming it down or something like that, or snowing, it might be a tougher trip for you guys. So, but as it turns out, you've lost your quarterback, so we'll see how it impacts this game.
Yep, and not even just the quarterback. We Odell Beckham Jr. hasn't played with us yet. River Craycraft was probably going to be. He's not a big name, but he's a safety valve for Tua. He's been out. Malik Washington, who 6th round rookie, but he was going to be our slot guy to start the season. He missed the first 2 weeks. Team's been injured to hell. I'm not ready to say we're looking at quarterbacks yet. I think Tua's already, Rap Sheet came out and said Tua's planning on coming back. And I'm basically treating it like until he says he's done, I'm planning for Tua to be there. We got to work on some stuff, not just with him, but with protecting him. But I'm treating it like Tua will be back. And I'm not a doctor, but the more we learn about concussions, the more it's like you can't rush it, and you just gotta. Yes, like you said, it's a unique situation, but with the concussions, you just have to wait. Like we talk about soccer for a bit. You see all the concussions, and some people they get like 10, 12, and then some they're come back and they're good.
Yeah. Can I ask you a question? Because this is something we've talked, in my live streams and the podcast that I go on every week. One thing that's consistently come up is why Skylar Thompson is your backup quarterback. Now, maybe you will tell me that he is a good player and is highly rated by Miami, and you think he's actually pretty good. My sort of perception was, if you have a quarterback who has had a history of concussions, and in fairness, if you go back to Alabama, he had a serious, was like a hip injury or something. So it's a quarterback who has missed some time in his career. I would have thought it would have been extremely predictable for you guys to have signed an experienced backup. Somebody who has been there, done that, who started a lot of games in the NFL, because those backups exist. Like I think Jimmy G's is with the Rams, and you think I don't know what his relationship is with Mike McDaniel, but he knows the offense, he knows the system. You don't want Jimmy G playing a whole season, but if he was coming in now, like I know from a Seahawks perspective, I'm thinking I've seen this guy play well against Seattle before. I've seen this guy lead the Niners, in deep playoff runs. So I know that he's capable of that. Whether he's capable of it now, I don't know, but it would stand to reason that would perhaps give you a better chance of getting through however long Tua is going to be out than Skylar Thompson. But I don't know. I've not seen enough of. I've seen Skylar Thompson as much as everybody else. That I think it was like a playoff game when he played a couple of years ago. Like, what is the thought process on your backup situation?
Yeah. So I also put our admin, because he put it in the chat too. Everybody's rooting for Skylar to be good, but we did just sign Snoop Hundley off of Baltimore's practice squad. And people are more excited to see him play than they are Skylar. He is the backup because we had we signed Mike White last year. We gave him good backup money, and he lost a job to Skylar Thompson in preseason. So honestly, as soon as Mike White got cut, honestly, even before that, after the first preseason game, most people wanted us to go sign our old friend Ryan Tannehill to come in and be the backup. So most people are not excited about it. To me personally, the big issue the first 2 weeks of the season has been, well, one is offensive line, but I don't think our play calling has helped much. And whenever Skylar's played, I feel like Mike McDaniel still tries to call it like Tua is in the game, and you can't do that. Everybody's rooting for him, but most of us are not excited about the backup situation.
I mean, that's certainly that the thought process with the Seahawks fans is like I don't really understand, or at least the ones I've spoken to, I don't really understand why we're playing Skylar Thompson this weekend. And if Tyler Huntley can come in and do a job, he's one of those players who, he feels ideal to come in and replace Lamar Jackson. And obviously he had that weird season where he got in the Pro Bowl, didn't he? Because people just basically voted him in. Yeah, he barely played or something. He played a game or something like that. But whether he can come in and do the Shanahan offense, I'd be quite skeptical of that. But look, I can remember for years in Seattle when we had Russell Wilson, it always kind of, because he was such an Iron Man, Russ, in his peak. You obviously, I know he's injured at the minute. The thought always felt like they didn't need to go and sign a backup. And then there was when we had to watch preseason games with whoever Seattle's backup was, it was torturous because it was someone who had no real reason to be there, and that was difficult. But he never missed a game, Russ, until he did stop missing games. With Tua, it just felt like there's always a chance he's going to miss a couple of games somewhere down the road. So I'm a bit surprised that they haven't done more there.
Yeah, honestly, even I'm fairly pro Tua, and I'm kind of shocked that we were content with Skylar Thompson too, especially because Mike White got beat. But also, as we have more people joining us, did want to talk about the Seahawks a bit. You guys had a coaching change. I'm a big fan of Mike McDonald. He coached my Michigan Wolverines for a year. Was very impressed. Then he went back to Baltimore. Feels like the Seahawks and the Dolphins now have a very similar transition going to the Baltimore 3-4 defense. We brought Anthony Weaver in to be our defensive coordinator. It looks like, and from what I've seen early on, everybody's expecting real big things from Boa Mafe. Seems like he's been getting a lot of pressure so far this year. What are the early returns on Mike McDaniel? Or Mike McDonald, excuse me.
Yeah, don't worry. I've made that mistake a couple of times. They're very similar names, aren't they? I bet the announcers are going to hate the fact that it's Mike McDaniel versus Mike McDonald this weekend, by the way. I mean, there probably should be a drinking game about how often they get them mixed up. So what are the early returns? It's quite hard to say. In the first game, they absolutely shut down the Broncos. But then I have no idea what Sean Payton was doing. I mean, I don't know what Sean Payton's doing, period. I mean, I don't know if you saw the Broncos game of the weekend where he didn't even try the onside kick at the end. I mean, it was insane. And then when he played Seattle, it was just check down, get out the pocket. I don't think he really gave Bo Nix a chance in that game to do anything. So they took the D-line out of it by getting out the pocket, getting the ball out quickly, but then brought the second-level defenders into it. They had a field day against Denver, just basically swarmed to the ball, and everybody felt very good about the way the defense played in week one. And then last week, they just got run all over. Like, until the end of the New England game, it did feel like a slow death. Like you were just watching New England run. Antonio Gibson, Ramondre Stevenson, they just ran all over Seattle, and it felt like the fourth quarter was just a domination in the trenches by the Patriots, right up until they had a kick blocked, and then the game just completely flipped. It was a very strange trigger that field goal, and all of a sudden they couldn't do anything on offense. New England and Seattle moved the ball very well. So I don't know what to say about the McDonald defense in Seattle so far, other than it's had a decent start. It's still a work in progress. You mentioned Boya Mafe. He's getting a lot of pressures, but needs to turn those into sacks. They don't have Uchenna Nwosu, who is their most accomplished edge rusher. He's still injured at the minute. I don't think he's going to be back for this game. Derek Hall's playing okay off the edge. Leonard Williams is probably the best defensive lineman, I would say. He's had a very good start to the season. Big things are expected of Byron Murphy, but I think he's going through a little bit of a rookie sort of learning experience, which is no real fault of his. That's just how it is. And I think that if it was going to suggest that the main sort of key players to be wary of is probably in the secondary. Julian Love's had a fantastic first two games at free safety. And the two cornerbacks, Devin Witherspoon and Tariq Woolen in particular, just look superb. I think Woolen, with the guidance of this staff, could easily be a top 3 cornerback by this time next year. So, they're the players. They're the key players, I would say, on defense.
Okay. Notice you didn't mention our old friend Jerome Baker. Mr. SR producer is very notorious for his dislike of Jerome Baker. So,
he's doing okay. I mean, like, he left the game against New England with an injury, and Tyrese Knight came in, the rookie. So I don't know what his injury status is. I've not seen an injury report yet. And Mike McDonald is already notorious for not giving any information on injuries, to the point of it being quite painful to listen to during press conferences at times. So I don't know if he will even play in this game. But he had a good debut. He had a fumble recovery. So, but I can tell you, like, the Seahawks fans equally. The ones that I speak to, there was one friend of mine sent me a video of Jordan Brooks running, or trying to run in trying to catch somebody up in the Buffalo game. So I think we're probably both. Look, it's like that Spider-Man meme, like we're pointing at each other right now, like looking at each other's linebackers.
Yeah, Jordan Brooks was one of the only bright spots against Buffalo. He actually didn't have a bad game. It's actually been more David Long making mistakes so far, and Brooks has been having to run. But it's interesting. And of course, the other guy you guys got from us, Connor Williams. Most Dolphin fans wanted to re-sign him. Unfortunately, didn't know if he was going to play with the ACL. Aaron Brewers looked fine for missing the early camp. How's Connor Williams been doing? Because if I looked at the stats, it looks like Charles Cross is having a great start of the year for you guys. But it sounds like it's a mixed bag for the rest of the offensive line.
Well, it's probably the biggest question mark on the team, the offensive line. So in the first game, the pass protection was absolutely atrocious. You know, you've probably seen the 2 safeties they gave up in the first half. Never seen anything like it. You know, the whole offensive line. I mean, I've never seen an offensive line destroy an entire team before, but that's what was happening in the first half against Denver. And then in the second half, they just resorted to run the ball, and then they got a bit of push up front and changed the game. So in that game, the run defense was very good. Charles Cross got like a 90-something grade, but I think that was mainly due to his run blocking rather than his pass protection.
Right.
I think he had a lot more modest grade against in the second game against the Patriots. And then in the last game, they could not run block at all. Like, there was no push. Now, I think you have to give the Patriots credit. I think they decided that they were going to force Geno Smith to win the game, which he did. You know, Geno Smith put the team on his back and won them the game with his arm. But I think that's how the Patriots hoped to play that game. And they just took away the inside run. Ken Walker not playing took away like a lot of the perimeter runs. Zach Charbonnet, who I like a lot, just couldn't get any room to sort of break through, and the Patriots clogged a lot of gaps. So I think we've seen like a good pass blocking performance and a good run blocking performance, but then the other side of the ball in each game has been like a horror story. Like, it's been an absolute Halloween horror show. And so with this game, I just wonder what the Dolphins are going to do, because the Dolphins, do they decide we're going to clog the running game like the Patriots did and try and make Geno Smith beat, let's say, Jalen Ramsey with his arm? Or are they going to do a bit more of what the Broncos did and try and, you know, sit deep and play the passing game a little bit heavier and run the risk of Seattle running on them? I think that's going to be an interesting chess match to see what they do. Although I can see that you put the comment there saying that Ramsey has had a terrible start to the season, which the thing is, though, is that Jalen Ramsey, I don't know if you Dolphins fans are aware of this, Jalen Ramsey and DK Metcalf have a long history together from when they played at the Rams, and Ramsey often got the better of DK Metcalf in those matchups. I will tell you now that Jalen Ramsey, this will be the game of his life. You know, it will not be for the want of trying that he does not have a great game in this contest. He will be desperate because him and DK just don't seem to like each other, and it's a major rivalry. So we'll see. And you can, and DK has shown in the past that you can get into him a little bit, and he can lose his cool at times. So we'll see if that happens on Sunday.
Yeah, I think the big matchup, and it's one I can already tell you right now that Seattle's one, is going to be Jackson Smith and Jegba in the slot, likely going up against Cater Cahill. 2 years ago, Cater was great, undrafted rookie slot, regressed last year, and he has been by far the Dolphins' worst player so far this season. We've been dropping a lot into zone. He has been not getting the proper depth. He is losing his man quite a bit, and you see it a lot in both the Jaguars game and Buffalo game. A lot of the big plays in the past game in both games came from the slot against Cater. So that's going to be the big matchup that I'm curious if Seattle takes advantage of. For the front seven, our D tackle situation's a little tough. There's hits and misses, but they still basically have Jalen Phillips on a pitch count coming back from the Achilles. I heard, though, and this is also a question for my fantasy team, I heard that Walker's probably not going to play. Is that what it's looking like?
I mean, if I had to guess, I think he's probably going to miss a month. He's had this like abdominal oblique issue in the past and has missed some time. And when he picked up the injury against Denver, you could see he came off the field and it was all, been innocuous. He came off the field and was kind of like cursing as he came off the field. And I was kind of hoping at the time, I remember thinking right in that instance, I really hope he just feels like he missed out on a big run there, because that does not look good, the way that he was reacting to that. And it made me think he thinks he's injured the same thing he's injured like last season. And he didn't practice at all last week. The fact is that they've just added another running back to the practice squad today. So I would imagine that's because they just want a bit of extra protection and depth in that position, because they don't anticipate Walker being back. So my guess would be, I don't think we will see him for another 2 or 3 weeks. Don't hold me to that for your fantasy teams, but I think that's probably the case. I think, look, the thing with Seattle is they do have weapons. The problem they had like in the past was, one, they had Shane Waldren, the current Chicago Bears offensive coordinator, running the show, and he just did not know how to get the most out of the players. Like he would do something really good one week, like feature the tight ends, then that wouldn't happen again for like 5 weeks, and it'd be really frustrating. I think Ryan Grubb, the current offensive coordinator, is very different, and I think he's going to cook up creative ways to make the most of these weapons. And, you have got DK with great speed, great size. You have got Jackson Smith and Jigba, and he will line up everywhere. Like he can take deep passes himself, and he can be very effective in the slot. But, the best player in the slot is probably Tyler Lockett. If what you're saying there about the slot corner, that could be, they might put Tyler Lockett on him. And Tyler Lockett, savvy veteran, could really exploit that cornerback. But then, you have Noah Fant, who everyone's still waiting to show, the top 20 pick potential that he had when Denver took him. He's still not got there with that. I'm waiting for the tight ends to get a bit more involved, because I do think Seattle has some good tight ends that we haven't seen so far, and the running backs can catch passes and they can run the ball. So I think it's an underrated offense in general. I don't think people are giving it enough respect and credit. But if as a trio of receivers. Obviously, I know Miami have got a couple of fantastic receivers, and a dynamic pass catching tight end. But with Metcalf, Jackson Smith, and Jigba and Lockett, that is one of the better trios in the league. And I don't think people give them the recognition. And they if Ryan Grubb can get the most out of them, they'll cause a lot of teams problems.
Yeah, I'd argue they might be the top trio in the NFL if you get them. It's kind of tough.
It's hard. It's hard, isn't it, without a list of every trio to sort of wonder where they would rank. I think they'd be in the top. They're definitely in the top 10 of trios. But there are obviously, is Metcalf as let's say is the number one receiver. He's not better than like Devontae Adams, but is Adams, Brock Bowers, and whoever else is in Las Vegas better than Metcalf, Smith and Jigba, and Lockett? Probably not. So that's I suppose that it's the value of the depth there for Seattle.
And just out of curiosity, because you mentioned Shane Waldron, are you having watched Shane Waldron offenses? Are you shocked by the early struggles Caleb Williams has had?
No, I mean, I'm sorry. Like he got the job, and I don't know where this optimism and excitement came from Bears fans. Like I had a friend who got in touch with me straight away as a Bears fan saying, "Is this good news?" And I said no. And then there was one or two others who I don't know, but they DM'd me and said, "What can you tell me?" And I said, "You aren't going to like this. Like this is just he's a completely is undynamic a word? Like whatever the opposite of dynamic is. Like to listen to him speak, he would bore anybody to death. Like he does not have much excitement in his voice. I cannot imagine him standing up in a room full of people and telling them, like especially NFL players, what to do. His scheming was just. He would do, like I said, two things. Like there'd be one game, like he would come out and it'd be like watching the McVay and the Shanahan offenses featuring a tight end, and the tight end would get like 120 yards or something, and you'd feel like they dominated the game playing that way. And then you'd say, right, let's see more of that next week, and the tight end would have no targets, and you think, well, how does that work? Like, why is that? Why was that week? Why is there such a difference? And then the other thing that he would do is, like, if things were going wrong in a game, that was it. Like the thing that there was no fixing it. Like the Seahawks had 3 or 4, maybe even more games last year under Waldren, where they would struggle to get 5 yards in a half, like a half, like no exaggeration, no points, nothing, and it was unbearable to watch. And then he goes to Chicago, and there was this like excitement, like what an appointment and all this, and like people in the media were celebrating it. And I was like, what have you like? I know Seattle's like in the other end of the country, but have you not watched any of the games? Like, there's no, I mean, like the Bears. The Bears fans get a bit excited every now and again, and you know they get a bit carried away, and they probably got a bit carried away again. I mean, they had a very fluky win against Tennessee, and then they lost to the Texans by a score, but it could have been 20-point deficit. They need a new staff. Like they need to go on. Everyone's on about Kubiak, aren't they, in New Orleans, because he's had 2 games that have gone well. So they need to go and get somebody who can probably get the most out of their young quarterback and make another set of changes.
Yeah, I was really curious about that because I like a lot of the moves the Bears made, but then I'm seeing people on like FS1 saying they're going to the Super Bowl, and I was like, they're not that good, guys. Come on now.
I mean, I think they were. There were like power rankings with them in the top 16, and look, it's easy to say now, isn't it? I mean, and they are 1-1. It's not that they're 0-2 and looking like the Panthers or anything, but I don't understand where that came from. If you think I really like Rome Odunze, he's a class act.
Yeah.
To think that he and a rookie quarterback was suddenly going to hit it off and be amazing. That, you know, Keenan Allen. I don't people realize Keenan Allen's production last year is because they forced him the ball all the time in LA. Like, what's his name? The guy who's now with the Eagles, the defensive coordinator, the ex-Boise State quarterback. My memory's terrible. He's there now. He forced the ball. He forced the ball. Kellen Moore, thank you. Yep. He forced the ball to Keenan Allen, and like he's already injured. And like, is Shane Waldron going to force the ball to? No, because he'd never force the ball to DK Metcalf. Like, did you see the thing that Jackson Smith and Jigba said in the offseason? Like, they said, what are the Bears getting with Shane Waldron? And he just basically said, good luck. And like, this is not somebody who ever says anything controversial in interviews, and yet he was just quite honest and open there with like, I do not rate this guy. So I think the Bears are gonna have a very frustrating season, and their fans who probably got their hopes up are going to be massively disappointed.
Yeah, probably looking at a new coach, like you said, new coach next year. To talk about offensive coordinators, it is funny because I do consider Mike McDaniel one of the top play designers in the NFL. The first 2. And I guess going back to last year a bit, there have been questions because when you have Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, you fall in love with the long ball a bit. A discussion this last couple of days on Dolphins Twitter has been, should McDaniel give up the play calling? As an outsider, do you have an opinion on that? Or like, is that one of those things where it's like, look, you just have to give him patience. It's just because, to preface as well, they're even now, even with the Dolphins taking out Tua getting injured, even now, a lot of teams are having very sloppy starts to the season. So is that just the kind of thing where you just have to kind of let it ride out, or you think there might be something to that?
Well, I think that's a good point. I can't remember what the Monday Night Football and the Sunday Night Football stat lines were, but when I was doing the national radio broadcast over here on Sunday night, we were running through how many quarterbacks had a 300-yard game, and it was 3. You know, and that was Jared Goff. He had no touchdowns and 2 interceptions, and they lost. The Lions lost, and there was Brock Purdy who had 1 touchdown, 1 interception, 1 fumble, and they lost. And Geno Smith was the only quarterback who had 300 yards and a win. So it goes to show that across the board, we're not seeing as much in the way of passing yards. I do think there's something to the way preseason has changed, which is I think offenses are needing a bit of extra time. It used to be that the first game was often you would regularly see like a 9-6 type score in one of the games on the first week of the season because the offenses were crap. And then, people would get hit the straps a little bit a few weeks down the line. That's going to be harder for Miami now because Tua is injured. But I don't know. My idea, I mean, you'd be better off sort of telling me whether any of this is true. My sort of perception is that I like McDaniel. I like him as a person. I think he appears to me to be a good fit for the team and a good coach. And you sort of, whenever I watch the Dolphins, like they do tend to have these games at the start of the season where they stack up a load of points against a good team, and you think, wow, they're the real deal. And for whatever reason, and I don't know if this is a Miami thing or the actual location and the place. But when it gets to sort of those games where, in the playoffs, when the weather's turned a little bit and they have to go on the road and stuff like that, I just don't personally feel like I can trust them. Now, you've had kind of injuries that have maybe derailed things a little bit, to key players, like your pass rush disappeared, with injuries, didn't it, last season?
Yep.
So that might play a part in some of that because you do need pass rushers and you need a running game in the playoffs. But it's one of those where, like, if I was to sort of think there are some issues here, I don't really know how Miami solved them, but is it worth firing the coach or, like, for example, having a different coach to go through that whole cycle again when it's pretty clear that McDaniel has some positives? As you say, my perception is that he is a good play caller and that's an asset for the Dolphins. So I would probably just commit, stay the course, and the Dolphins have just got to find that winning playoff football, I guess, which is always the toughest thing. And many teams are very good at getting to the playoffs, but then they don't deliver in the postseason. There's so many of them. Think of all those Bengals teams that win a playoff game. And maybe Miami just have got to find a way to not be one of those.
Yeah. The big thing, and a lot of people point out to it, is the offensive line. It was basically ignored this offseason, for better or worse. Mike McDaniel, and there aren't anybody people don't want McDaniel fired yet, but there's questions about giving up play calling, like I said. The issue is, and this, Rob, the Shanahan offense, wherever it's been, it's built on athletic offensive linemen, running the ball, play action. Miami actually has I will, and a lot of people on Twitter will hate me for saying this, I do think the run blocking has been good so far this year. The issue is, and even last year too, it was good. The issue is we fall in love with the big play. There's no such thing as a 20-point play, but when you have Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, you fall in love with the big play, the long ball. So I think what we're missing is I feel we ignore tight end too much. We got Jonnu Smith, but the first two games we've been using him more as a third wide receiver rather than someone in line. So I think missing that middle of the field threat's a big issue. And I believe it was from Ben Baldwin on Twitter, who does, I think he goes by Stats Cowboy or something like that, if you've seen him on Twitter. He pointed out Miami actually has a very low percentage of play action passes, which is weird because we run a lot of read options. But when we do run it, Tua is by far the most accurate quarterback in the league. So my big issue is we just don't run enough. And I don't think until we actually commit to being a running team, I think that'll hold us back. And yes, it's cool. But like, even if you look at the Chiefs, people don't think of them as a running team. Damian Williams made big plays the first Super Bowl they won. In the last two Super Bowls, Isaiah Pacheco's been big down the stretch, as their defense. I think Anthony Weaver's a good choice for defensive coordinator, so I think that'll help with some of the defensive issues. But until we really learn, Miami's the worst 3rd and 1 team last year, or 3rd and short, 4th and short. Until you learn to play smash mouth football, we're going to get beaten later in the season.
Well, let me give you a perspective from a Seahawks fan who's watched quite a few poor offensive lines over the years. I do have some sympathy with the Dolphins and many other teams, because it is the hardest. You can try anything, and teams try everything. Trust me, they try to fix these offensive lines. I mean, I just had a look at your depth chart, and just sort of looking at it tells a story. So obviously they've spent quite a lot of money on Terran Armstead. They've drafted Liam Eichenberg in the second round, Austin Jackson in the first round, Patrick Paul in the second round. Previously I think Robert Hunt was a second rounder, wasn't he? Signed Connor Williams. So they've pretty much done a lot of things, and a lot of them don't work, but that is widespread around the league. Yeah. I suspect what they've done is they've looked at the Niners, who made a very calculated and genius move to go and get Trent Williams for a third-round pick. And the rest of their line has basically just been a bunch of guys. But because they have the best left tackle in the NFL and a scheme that is very much on point and always produces, probably helps that Shanahan's the one running it rather than a disciple of Shanahan. It's the actual original person doing it. They've managed to just run the ball, play a very physical brand of football. They can throw and run very, very well when they need to. They've had a lot of postseason success. I think they looked at that and thought, well, if we can get like a very experienced left tackle, it might sort of set the tone for everything else. Then we go and get Armstead, but obviously has injury issues, and we all knew that with when he was with the Saints. And then they go and draft a bunch of guys. Now, if you talk to any Seahawks fan, they'll say, we just need to keep drafting players. Just keep drafting second round, third round, first round players for the offensive line. It's taken Charles Cross 2 years of just basically below average play. He was a top 10 pick to the point where maybe he's now turned a corner. The Seahawks have drafted, like Damian Lewis has just gone to Carolina. He was so inconsistent in Seattle as a third round pick. Seahawks have just drafted Christian Haynes in round 3. He can't get on the field. It's so hard to build a really good offensive line. And it's no surprise that like the Chiefs, whether it's by luck or just the same foresight that enabled them to trade up for Patrick Mahomes, they've been able to work around it. Like Joe Tooney, they've invested in the right expensive guard. They go and find another guard from Tennessee in like the 5th round or the 6th round or something, who's ended up being good for them. They are the team that drafts Creed Humphrey at the end of round 2 when everybody else passes on him sometimes twice. They've been able to do that. I mean, even now, you look at the Chiefs. I watched our game in England was the Chiefs-Bengals this weekend. Their 2 tackles were horrendous. They played appallingly. They almost lost them the game. So even the Chiefs are having issues. And Seahawks fans have been pulling their hair out for years. Why didn't they draft Creed Humphrey? It's like, well, why didn't any of the other teams who did it?
Dolphins Twitter have been doing that for years.
So everybody does it because the Chiefs. It's like, I'm sure there were loads of teams going, why didn't we draft Russell Wilson? He lasted to the 75th pick. The Seahawks got that. Why didn't we draft Dak Prescott, who lasted to the 4th round? You can always play that game. It is the hardest unit to get right. And whether you go after veterans, high cost, high draft picks, whether you have a style of player that you want to go for. Like John Schneider is one of the best GMs in the league. He's had a history of success. He built the LOB era, and he can't build an offensive line. And it's tough. And if the Dolphins were able to do it, with the offensive weapon you've got and the investment you've done in your pass rushes, you'd have a heck of a team. But it does make sense to me that you've struggled to do that. And people can often say, like, well, why did the GM fix this? Why did the GM rectify? Why don't we draft this guy? Why don't we sign that guy? I tell you now, there'll be about 28 other fan bases saying exactly the same thing about why their offensive line is crap as well. And there's probably only like Dallas, Kansas City, maybe the Eagles who have had a bit of success with their offensive line. Everybody else seems to be like patching things up and hoping for the best. And it's probably no surprise that teams who've managed to do it, I think your producer saying Cleveland, that's another good example. Tampa Bay had a decent line when they won the Super Bowl as well, and they needed it to protect Tom Brady. They had some hits. They hit on a small school interior lineman drafted in the 2nd round. They've hit on Wirfs. They've had some the other left tackle they drafted in round 2 a few years ago, whose name Donovan Smith. So there are teams who've done it, but my word, there's 25, 26, 27, 28 teams who are all in the same boat. There's just the offensive linemen. I mean, I've been watching some of these, the players who are getting projected to go early in the 1st round next year. The 2 LSU tackles you see them in top 15 in every single freaking mock draft. That Will Campbell, who's projected to go in the top 10 in every mock draft you'll read, I don't think he's a tackle. I mean, I think he's not going to go in the 1st round. He's not playing very well. But people just put him in the 1st round, because they're desperate. Everyone's desperate for the tackles. They're not there.
Yeah. To talk about that, a couple of years ago, I believe it was Rick Neuheisel on the radio said, it even goes down to college where they're struggling to find good offensive linemen in college. And the big thing is a lot of the high schools are going to 7-on-7. So now you're trying to turn tight ends into offensive linemen and you're just working on the fly.
Well, the other thing is that let's put you're a recruiter, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Or no, let's turn it around. You're a 5-star prospect. You weigh 280 pounds, let's say, an unbelievable athlete. And I'm a school, and I'm coming to you, and I'm going, okay, we've seen you play a bit of both on both sides of the ball. Come and play for us. I'll put you on the defensive line. By the way, Aaron Donald just got $30 million a year, and Chris Jones has got $30 million a year. And by the way, look, here's a stat sheet of our defensive. That defensive, he got 8 sacks last year, and that could be you. And that'll get you on the mock drafts and stuff like that. And we're going to play we'll run our scheme around you, and we'll be creative, and we'll stunt you and all this. And you'll only play like 50% of the reps, so you won't be too tired. It's great, and that's a convincing argument. Now, if another school comes to you and goes, I'm going to put you at left tackle, and I don't have any stats for you, and there's only about 4 good ones in the NFL. So come and play left tackle for us. Which are you going to, if you're 16, 17, 18 years old, what are you going to be swayed by? You're going to be swayed by the money, the stats, the glory, the sack dance, everything that comes with that. Like if you're going to play offensive line, you kind of have to really be focused on that. That's what I want to play. And so many of these guys just end up going to these teams, and now it's getting worse because you could go to Georgia. Georgia might collect 5-star defensive lineman, 4-star defensive lineman, and then the 2 that they don't want, they'll just go and transfer to Minnesota or something like in a couple of years, and it doesn't matter. But it just the cycle continues. But by that point, they're defensive linemen, and you just are not getting enough quality offensive linemen, and the league's suffering for it. It might be a bit old-fashioned, but I do like to see an old-fashioned battle in the trenches where the biggest guys just hammering each other. And yes, the explosive pass play is the most exciting play in the game, but I think combined with physical play in the trenches is what makes football such a great sport.
I'd agree there, and I actually do think for our game this weekend, I think they're actually going to see 2 teams that are going to try and do it. It might be to very success, but I think it is going to be a battle in the trenches this weekend.
Yeah, I think so. Shane, assuming that he's going to be the focal point of your running game, scares me a little bit. I do think we're quite good with speed in the perimeter. Mike McDonald's been talking about that it's going to be a perimeter run game rather than an inside the tackles type of game like against New England. So it'd be interesting to see what that test like. Tyreek Hill is just like Tyreek Hill. To those of us who don't watch him every week, to me, he is he is legitimately one of those rare players. That probably won't ever happen again. Like we had Marshawn Lynch. There won't be another Marshawn Lynch. Yeah. There just won't be. People will compare. Someone compared Jordan Mason of the Niners this week to Marshawn Lynch, and it's just like get in the sea. Like there's not going to be another Marshawn Lynch. There probably won't be another Tyreek Hill. Like they're just very very rare. And then when you put Waddle on the field as well, it is difficult. It's just whether your quarterback can he avoid the mistakes? Can he go into Seattle? In that kind of atmosphere. I think it is going to be raining on Sunday. Like, can he do enough to? Can he have 180 yards passing and convert some third downs to complement the run if you can get it going? Those are the big questions. And look, Geno Smith is playing very, very well. And, can you guys stop if DK and Jalen Ramsey do end up cancelling each other out, which may well happen? Like you say, is it a game that Tyler Lockett and Smith and Jigba just they work the middle or they work the other side of the field?
Yeah. I'll just give my score prediction right now. I think you guys are going to win 28-14. I think we'll find a way to win, but like I said, I just don't trust our secondary yet. I think I do like what we're building in the front seven. I think they're going to start taking because Chop Robinson's flashed a couple times as our first round pick. Jalen Phillips is getting back. I think we'll get a couple sacks. I don't think we're going to do enough until late. You talked about drinking games earlier. One drinking game to have. Watch how many times we run a crack sweep to the right side. See how many times we do that, or a crack toss is what it's called. It's our one play we run all the time. with the tight end as the lead blocker. So you'll have fun seeing that all day. But I just don't think this week we have I think you guys just have the horses, too many horses for us to keep up with. And Skylar holds the ball way too long. So I think we'll get a touchdown early and then get a late consolation touchdown.
Well, one thing that we haven't mentioned is that, sorry to bring this up, but the Bills have played the Dolphins quite well over the years. And Leslie Frazier, who was the defensive coordinator in Buffalo, is now on Mike Macdonald's staff. So there is a chance that they will have a good game plan for this game. I think Seattle will win. I'm not, for anybody who's listening, I am not, I'm often accused by Seahawks fans as being a horrible misery because I don't just think everything is awesome all the time. But I do think Seattle will win the game. In terms of a score prediction, I don't know, because part of me, like when you were talking, I felt obliged to go a little closer just because the two previous games were close. And I've kind of had it in my mind that probably this is a 6-point game. But then I don't know how you get to a 6-point scoreline, because I think Seattle will get in the 20-point range again. I think they, probably 20 to 23 points for Seattle. And I can see Miami scoring 3 times. It's just, are they touchdowns or are they, is it a touchdown and 2 field goals? So I'd probably go with 20-13, 23-13 is kind of what I was going for. But if I was to give like what I think the spread should be, I think it probably should be a 6-point spread, given that Seattle's at home and that Tua's not playing.
I believe the last I saw it was like 5 or 6, so it's about that. And to sway it too, Skylar Thompson's career high for passing is like 220 yards, and it took him 44 attempts to get to that. So it's not gonna be great. But as we get to 45 minutes, gonna go to something a little more fun for me to talk about. We talked about go back to and our producer's a Swansea fan, so since we're just gonna go and ask you for the 3 of us that care about it in the chat, go to end it on who are your 3 teams to get promoted this year to the Prem.
Let me pull up the table because I want to do this properly. If we're doing this, 3 teams to win promotion. Okay, well, I think that Burnley might have too much, and that they might eventually. I know they've lost a game, but I think that they might just get into a bit of a groove. So I'll go with them one way or another. I think they will get promoted. So JJ Watt will be happy. I think that one of the other relegated teams that we cover, Sheffield United, have got a very good chance. Just because I've watched them a couple of times, and they're the problem with Sheffield United is they have a great 1 to 11, but they don't have much depth. So if they have injuries, that could be an issue. But I do think United have got a promotion winning 11. So I'm as of today, I think they are one of the 3 best. And then if you'd have asked me this a couple of weeks ago, I would have said Leeds, but they just seem to be self-destructing again. So let's go for an outside team, and I will go with the team that's currently top, West Brom, to go through on playoffs, just because I think their manager, Carlos Corberán, obviously he almost got Huddersfield up with a team that, they got to the playoff final with a team that pretty much got relegated the following season when he left. So I think he's obviously a good coach, and I think so. They're the 3 I'll go. I'll go with Burnley and Sheffield United, and then West Brom in the playoffs. So I hope I haven't offended anybody with that.
I will go Burnley as well. I will go with the team in second place, Sunderland. Oh, wow. And to make my producer happy, Swansea by the playoff.
Well, look, I always like going to Swansea. It's a long way away from where I am. It's like 4 hours minimum. But I used to work in a place called Port Talbot quite often, which is just not too far away from Swansea. So I always enjoyed my little trips down there, like in a Bridge End, which is not too far away. And whenever you get to Swansea, there's always, from the last time I was there, there's always a good food for the press. So that's a big thing. And that stadium is quite good. And there's a good car park there. So these are all the things that matter to the media when they've travelled a long way. So I don't mind Swansea. I tell you on Sunderland, though, I'd be very wary of them, just because they've had a good start. They chucked away a game against Plymouth at the weekend, and
I just watched Sunderland till I die, so I'm
going. Oh, is that it?
Yeah, that's
they're a classic team who start well and get everybody's hopes up, and then I could see them being a bit of a letdown for their fans.
Yep. Well, hey Rob, thank you for taking the near hour to talk football with me. Welcome back anytime. We'll probably do another draft this year and have you join us if you're down.
Yeah, my pleasure, and best of luck to the Dolphins. The Miami Dolphins, one of those teams that I have absolutely no hatred of whatsoever. And
that's how I feel about the Seahawks. So.
Yeah, it's funny because there are quite a few teams that I dislike, but the Dolphins are not one of those. So very best of luck after this weekend, and I hope you have a great season. Hope Tua is okay, and I hope you can get that offensive. I hope we can both get, by this time next year, maybe we could have a conversation again and talk about how great our offensive lines are.
That's the dream, isn't it? All right. Have a good night, Rob.
Thanks, man.